Russia, the biggest country in the world, covering almost a sixth of the planet's land surface. Traveling around the whole of this country is no easy matter, but here in St. Petersburg, thanks to this giant model, you've got a chance to really appreciate what kind of country this is. The Russian Federation is located in the eastern section of Europe and the northern section of Asia. In the west of the country lies the Eastern European plain. Then there's a mountain system, the Urals, beyond which stretches the western Siberian plain. Russia's total area amounts to 17,075,400 square kilometers. I'm not surprised at all that this has been named the Grand Model of Russia. I'm going to be looking over an area of 800 square meters here. I can see Russian towns and villages and fields, a whole country laid out before you. Not every traveller can immediately decide where he or she wants to go more than anywhere else. Standing next to the Grand Model, you're faced with the same problem. Everything here is of interest. The Kaliningrad Oblast is the most westerly territory in the country. It's actually located a little way off to the side. Just as in real life, it's separated from the main territory of Russia by other countries. If we don't take Kaliningrad into account, the model comprises a gigantic unified whole, and from the west you can't even see where the east lies. The contours of the model are made up of rivers and lakes, plains and hills, villages, small towns and massive cities. Across this vast area, we can see tunnels and bridges, ports and air bases, factories and industrial complexes. It's all just as it is in real life. The dream of the man behind this model, Sergei Morozov, has been brought to life. I understood that my judge would be the spectator, and that the most demanding, the judges of the highest quality, would be Russian spectators. I wanted to make the model in such a way that people would very precisely recognize their homeland. If I was to use some ready-made technical solutions from Germany, from other European countries, American or Japanese solutions, then people probably wouldn't believe in them. So we tried to Russify all these sites, to create the landscape in such a way that people would recognize their homeland. Russia is a country with a history that goes back centuries, with a rich culture. But including all of the natural features, towns and villages in this vast country will be impossible. This isn't an architectural model after all, where the sketches are done in total compliance with the demands of the customer. The Grand Model is a creative work, and the people that have made it have focused on certain priorities. The main idea is to give expression to the spirit of the country and its regions through images. Often, those images are very familiar. The city of St. Petersburg, you can recognize it by one symbol alone. The Peter and Paul Fortress, there it is. It looks just like it to me. This fortress was founded in 1703, and according to one legend, Tsar Peter the Great personally selected the site for its construction on Hare Island. Not far off is the spit of Vasilyevsky Island. The rostral columns, the stock market building, the detailing of these elements is stunning. Spectators, as if by magic, find themselves next to these magnificent constructions. The inhabitants here are toys, but they're so lifelike, spending their time on the squares, in the parks, working and resting. The capital of Russia is presented through several recognizable sites, the main one being Moscow's Kremlin. Moscow and St. Petersburg, they're the most famous Russian cities, but anybody who's been to other regions will tell you that there's much more to be seen in Russia. The incredible natural landscapes can be seen in this miniature version of the country. Here we can see a generalized image of the Black Sea coast. And to really give an impression of it, we've created a sea terminal. It's all handmade. At our workshop to create architectural sites, we often use a cold casting technique. In order to create identical elements in the architectural decoration, we use a master model, and then we use that to make copies. A multitude of blue lakes and mountain summits, steppe expanses and deep forests. Geographers have worked on the formation of these Russian landscapes. The shifts from one landscape to another are done smoothly, almost passing unnoticed through forests, mountainous riverbanks or railway line levees. The regions appear to flow into one another, and Europe has already transformed into Asia. During the creation of this model, over 10,000 kilograms of plaster were used, as well as other materials, some of them quite surprising. Kiji is an island on Lake Onega in Karelia. It's home to an internationally renowned architectural ensemble comprising several wooden places of worship. Their outlines can easily be made out in these exhibits, and they're made out of simple wooden toothpicks. It would be very hard to say exactly how many there are here. You can just imagine how painstaking the work must have been. All of the exhibits are very delicate, and you're not allowed to touch them. You can, however, spend as long as you want studying the details of the model. You can even take a close look at the microscopic pigeons and seagulls on the roofs of the buildings, or the crows in the fields. The model has many scenes featuring people, though they're no more than 1.5 centimeters high. They're presented doing entirely normal, everyday things, as well as being engaged in some gripping events. For example, you can see how policemen arrest criminals who, of course, immediately hand themselves over to the law enforcement officers. And on the territory of a film studio, clearly part of the filmmaking process, you can see a flying saucer hovering in the air. I want people to leave this place with a smile on their faces. That was the goal that I set myself. At the same time, I couldn't make a refined heaven on earth because no one would believe in that. And the whole time I was strictly weighing that up. My star sign is Libra. How could I make sure it was accurate and great fun at the same time? Each fragment in the model is capable of telling a whole story about how factories and livestock farms work. Some of the exhibits move, and you're literally watching the development of events. On the outskirts of a forest not far from the Ural mountain range, a fire has sprung up. There's real smoke here, you can see the fire, and soon you can see how, one after another, tiny fire engines arrive and put out the forest fire. The impression is reinforced by entirely realistic sounds. It all appears to be happening in reality, albeit in miniature. Russia is so vast that the sun never sets on it. When it's setting on the Curonian Spit, it's already shining in the morning over Kamchatka. The eastern lands are the first to greet the new day. You can immediately sense that this is the Far East, although no specific cities are depicted here. It's enough to look at the landscape. In certain areas, the model makers have got ahead of time, building the bridge to Ruski Island, although at the moment it's still under construction. The day and night system is very realistic. Gradually, a certain section of the country is enveloped in the tones of sunset, and then almost total darkness descends, apart from the lights in the windows that switch on and the headlamps of cars. They continue their movements along Russia's highways by night. To create this spectacle, several 100,000 lamps and bulbs have been used. The smallest are the car's headlamps. As a rule, we use 3 colors. There's a warm white and then blue and red, which is used to create the impression of sunset and the impression of sunrise. That happens on our model about every 12 to 13 minutes. Our night is relatively short, however, shorter than in life. It lasts from 2 to 3 minutes, but as the model is very elongated, you totally get an impression that from east to west you're getting a full exchange of day and night. When it's sunrise in the east, in the west, in the Leningrad Oblast, it's still night. I've even got the impression that inside each car there's a little driver sitting at a little wheel. It's simply incredible. Cars, trucks, buses. On this model, they all adjust their trajectories, move round, slow down if there's another car approaching them. The buses even stop to pick up passengers. It's incredible. What are these cars doing, these ones that drive about, the intelligent ones? The car is held here. It builds up a charge, and this is a roller that takes the induction charge, local frequency variable. That's recorded in the controller on which the program is recorded that makes this car intelligent. That's to say that the car identifies the commands that are passed on by the infrared sensors. The sensors are located in the model, in the form of these little spots, special sensors that we've tried as best we can to mask, to somehow conceal, under the landscape. Yes, that's right. And the car, when it drives past, it communicates with them, as it were. It works on its own, like in real life. It sees the traffic light, it sees that the light is red, it stops. Then the vehicle has sensors that are located at the front and at the back of the vehicle. That means that when the vehicle catches up with another vehicle, if they're traveling at different speeds, then it stops, so there won't be an accident. We've got special places for overtaking so that the vehicles don't just follow each other around in a circle. Of course, the spectator doesn't know how much has been put in to ensure that it all operates to these rules and that it lives its own life. Every visitor simply sees that they're just like real cars, but very small. Breathing life into the model in making the cars move has been made possible by the team applying a certain amount of know-how. Tens of kilometers of wires and electronics are hidden under the model, and all this can be given new directions. Where necessary, new automobile routes can be set up. Russia in miniature. Thanks to this model, created in St. Petersburg, spectators have the chance to study the world's largest country in detail. Across an area of 800 square meters, towns and villages, factories and industrial complexes have been created. The lights in houses switch on and cars drive down the streets. The trains here delight spectators just as much as the cars. It's difficult to believe, but there are 2 kilometers of railway lines here and over 400 controllable railway points. Here you can see incredibly varied scenarios which are played out on the railway line. A locomotive returns to the depot. At the sorting station, a special turning circle has been laid out in order to economize on space. The circle turns, the locomotive moves on, and is then sent into one of the hangars. In real life, few get to see this process. Here, the fan depot with a turning circle is in operation right before your eyes. Superficially, this railway looks like a children's railway set, the kind we know so well. Does it have anything in common with that kind of children's toy? In a non-professional and professional railway, there are engines and carriages. In a children's railway set, it's analog. It's guided through increases and decreases in the voltage on the line. On our engines, we've got decoders. They receive the signal from the computer, from the control center, and the engine understands what it has to do, to go forward, backwards, to turn on the light, to signal. I've actually been watching the trains move round, and I've noticed that the individual trains aren't moving round to the same script. They're not just following a single trajectory. Every time they're doing something different. How did you manage to achieve that effect? Well, we spent a lot of time working out the routes. The setup was very painstaking. There are lots of scenarios that the trains move round to, both the passenger and the cargo trains. Basically, they're divided up into groups. There's a revolving lift. It's a lift to 15 different levels. On each level, there are 2 different routes, and we have about 30 different trains running on each of those levels. So that means that thanks to this device, this lift, this mechanism, as it were, you're able to have that number of scenarios. It allows us to increase the number of moving trains on the model. Basically, as far as I can understand, the railway network on the model is as varied and multi-branched as the railway network is in Russia, which is to say, in reality. All of the movement on the railway line operates according to the signals coming from the command center. There are lots of settings in the program being used, and there's an opportunity to create conditions that are as close as possible to real life. On the monitors at the command center, you can literally see all the trains that are in motion at any single time on the model. That includes those sections that the spectators can't see. This wouldn't be possible without those facilities. They're the junctions that allow the trains to turn round. The specialists here just need a single glance at the layout to understand what's going on in one territory or another. A white box means that the line is free. A red box means that it's occupied. The engines are waiting, or they're moving. That's immediately obvious too. They reserve themselves a line, and when they enter a certain section, it immediately lights up red. So that the operator doesn't have to leave his post, next to the model he has assistants who, in seconds, can deal with any minor hitches. Accidents on this railway line are extremely rare. What's more, there are 7 independent systems dealing with the railway engines in operation on the model. Even if one of them is suddenly put out of action, with the aid of the 6 remaining systems, the flows on the railway line are kept up at 100%. The creators of the model have managed to capture one of the most complex moments, where the electric train unhooks from the carriages and wagons. Then another train comes along and hooks up, taking the carriages and wagons on. It looks incredibly realistic thanks to the precise movements and the details that have been thoroughly thought out on each of the models. Cork has been placed under the rails, serving as an excellent sound insulation. With its aid, wonderfully realistic slopes have also been created. A distinguishing feature of this model in relation to others is that there's no division between the foreground and the background. All of our infrastructure, every element, is done at the same quality level. That means, for example, that this feature, the tower of a reservoir, can be seen from every side by the spectator. What's more, the spectators might have binoculars, and our goal was not to disappoint such spectators. So this tower, in terms of quality, is exactly the same, whatever side you're looking at it from. You can even examine every single brick. They're all very clearly distinguished, painted. That creates a very realistic effect. If you photograph it or show it in some special way, you can even fool people into thinking that it's real. I think that the toning is also done very well, the shadows. The painting on the finished model was done to an extremely high quality. Visitors always spend a long time examining the shipwrecking scene, depicting something that its creators say happened 20 years ago. The model has been made by hand from metal and plastic, but the materials used in the model are in fact incredibly varied. Right now I'm in Siberia. You can tell just by looking at the landscape, at the plant life and at the trees. But this patch isn't entirely finished. They're still working on it. Katya, what are you doing? I'm doing the bushes and the trees. You're going to make bushes and grass out of this material? Yes, it's a special material, colored. It's been chosen according to the color scheme that should be created in this site. What is this material? Flock. Yes, it's actually like moss in terms of the way it feels. And I can also see fir trees, Siberian fir trees. They're beautiful. You know what distinguishes this tree from one that you might see out in the expanses of Russia, apart from its size, of course? You can't prick yourself on it. It's so soft. It's lovely. I'm telling you that because you're never going to have a chance to try this for yourself. You're not allowed to touch the exhibits. I wanted to ask, the coastal cliffs, are they made from plaster? Yes, that's absolutely right. It's plaster, and it's all done by hand. And what's the river that flows past the cliffs called? It's a generalized depiction of a Siberian river. So you've examined views of rivers and imagined one. We decided not to offend anyone. What material is the river made out of? At the moment, this colored veneer is painted. Later, it will be covered in a two-component composite to make it look more like a real river. You know, it seems to me that every person working here must feel like they're some kind of magician, because all the people working on the model are creating an entire world, albeit in miniature, a whole country, to be more precise. The feature involving the most painstaking work, perhaps, is a field with sunflowers. All of the plastic plants have been individually planted, and prior to that, each flower has been individually assembled and glued together. Several months went into this work, and as a result, about 40,000 sunflowers were created. Nastya, tell me please, what's this place called, and what are you doing here? We're now in the Urals, next to the town of Nevyansk. The Nevyansk Tower is renowned because it stands on a slant. Not far off, there's a little village where I'm now setting out people. This village's street is packed with life. There are people out walking, there are cars and motorbikes, and some of these figures are really tiny. Do you do all this by hand, or do you use certain devices? The work is all in miniature, so putting things out by hand is very hard. We use tweezers. The people are glued on and set out at random. You put them where your artistic sense tells you to. So there's no system here, there's nothing planned out. You just use your artistic intuition. Yes, that's right. Can I take part in this process? Can I put a car on this street, say? Yes, of course. Let it go here then. The personnel working on the model are real creators who, in bringing their ideas to life, have to be incredibly careful not to damage what they've made. The vast bulk of the exhibits are extremely delicate. Sensing that you're like Gulliver in this land is probably great, but there's also a huge responsibility. Gulliver had to be careful not to damage the Lilliputians. He had to pay a lot of attention. I'm in this hatch for servicing the model, and I really have to watch my arms and be careful about every single motion. All of our staff that have to do this kind of thing have to be very careful, Gullivers too. There are about 100 people of extremely varied professions working at the Grand Model. Architects, designers, sculptors, artists, jewelers, and of course electronic engineers. They've all played their part here. It's all their work. The number of elements installed here can't be counted. Nobody has counted all the fir trees or houses, for example. The population is a little easier to calculate. There are about 200,000 people living in this incredible land. Work on the model continues to this day. The specialists are coming up with ever more unusual technical solutions, but when you get to see the model up close, you realize that it's not even about the unique developments. The model makers have managed to convey the expanses of the largest country in the world. Showing the most interesting sights, albeit in the form of generalized images, the creators of this model hoped that a virtual journey here would inspire spectators to go on real, thrilling trips across Russia, a country that is vast, unforgettable, and incredibly varied.